Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. Pope Francis sent a message to President Donald Trump today, offering prayers for wisdom, strength, and protection for the new president as he begins, today being the first day of his inauguration, his term of office for the next 4 years. Doug Keck joins us with a look at what the next 4 years could look like, some of the things that we can expect. We go on from there to speak with John Czarnetzky of the Ave Maria School of Law, because on Friday, this last Friday before the inauguration, former President Joe Biden proclaimed that the Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land. In 2020, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the amendment, theoretically reaching the 3/4 majority needed to amend the U.S. Constitution. But experts have said the amendment failed to pass the congressional deadline in 1982. It is unclear what, if any, legal weight the declaration actually carries, and it is expected to set off a legal fight for the incoming Trump administration. And then finally, we speak with Peter Laffin about the fact that President Donald Trump has been officially sworn in, 47th President of the United States, completing one of the, regardless of how we view this, how we think about it, the truth of the matter is it really is one of the greatest political comebacks in recent American history, in American political history. In his usual style, at his swearing-in ceremony, he declared that, quote-unquote, the golden age of America begins right now. As Catholics, we need to be hopeful, but cautiously so. We can be optimistic, but we also need to be mildly reticent. What can we actually expect from the next 4 years? I want to state this as an objective fact. We haven't won. The Church hasn't won here. Neither one of the main political parties is a complete an abject supporter of all of the moral and religious positions of the Catholic Church. And so we as Catholics, espousing the truths of the Catholic Church and holding on to the deposit of faith that we've received from Christ through his apostles down to us, have to keep fighting in whatever way we can to make our voices heard, and through the power of our vote, through the power of writing to our elected representatives, we have to fight for the preservation of the common good and ultimately the dignity of human life here in the United States. And we talk about all of this after the headlines.
Thank you, Marcus, and good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Monday, January 20th. It's the Feast of St. Sebastian. And today's news is brought to you by the Ave Maria University. Your vocation location is at avemaria.edu. America is reflecting on the legacy of civil rights icon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. While Martin Luther King Jr. Day was created in 1983 after the signing of legislation by President Ronald Reagan, the movement to honor Dr. King's birthday actually began 15 years earlier, days after his assassination in 1968. The first federal MLK holiday went into effect on January 20th, 1986, though several states were still resistant to the idea. The presidential inauguration takes place on Martin Luther King Jr. Day for only the third time since the federal holiday was declared for the late civil rights leader. President Clinton's second inauguration in 1997 and President Obama's second inauguration in 2013 were both on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Events celebrating the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. have taken place across the country throughout the weekend. Today in Atlanta, the MLK Day Beloved Community Commemorative Service is set for the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. The keynote speaker is Bishop William J. Barber, the second co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. President-elect Trump is using a Bible from his mother as well as the Lincoln Bible for his swearing-in today. His late mother gave him the Bible in 1955 for his primary school graduation, signed by church officials and inscribed with Trump's name. The Lincoln Bible was first used at President Lincoln's swearing-in 1861 and has been used 3 times since, during former President Obama's 2 inaugurations and Trump's first one. And wind chills as cold as 55 below zero are possible in parts of the north-central U.S. Cold weather is expanding through the central and eastern U.S. this week. Much of the country could see temperatures reach 15 to 25 degrees below historical averages. From the Ave Maria Radio.net news desk, I'm Dan McGraw.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Pope Francis sent a message to Donald Trump today offering prayers for wisdom, strength, and protection for the new president. Doug Keck, President and COO of EWTN, as he joins us every week, joins us to take a look at what the next 4 years could look like. Doug, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Well, thank you for having me on this Martin Luther King holiday.
It's a momentous occasion on a lot of levels. You've got the celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day and the cause that he fought for, and also Inauguration Day. So maybe a good place to begin would be to consider what the Holy Father shared in his message to Donald Trump today.
Well, obviously, I think one of the things, it's interesting because obviously the Holy Father has expressed his best wishes. I think outside of that, which is a perfunctory kind of process that happens between diplomats, etc., and countries, let alone the Holy Father in general, I think all of us are pretty well aware that he's not on the top. Trump is not on the top of the present Holy Father's hit parade, and certainly was not. I think it's fair to say looking forward to him winning. Though I have to think that he was very pleased about what's happening in Gaza and the peace accord that's going on there, and at least the exchange of the hostages, etc., which I think anybody who's fair-minded realizes only is happening at this point in time because of Donald Trump's maybe bravado or others would just say, coming from New York, just good negotiating tactics. That's how you do it. So I think in that way it has to be viewed positively. But of course, certainly the immigration issues related to what Trump's plans are have been announced, and which the vast majority of people actually in the United States now support, is not on, again, something that the Holy Father would be in favor of at all. I think that's one of his major issues. Though one of the things that kind of popped up in the last week or so that seemed a little awkward for the Vatican was when the ruling, they put out the fact that they had tightened up their own rules and regulations about people entering the Vatican or Vatican City illegally or without right permission, which does seem to be a little incongruous when you're at the same time telling every other country in the world basically they have to welcome every stranger who shows up at their door. So it's kind of an interesting mix there.
I couldn't agree more. And even when you think about the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and in terms of the juridical right of nations for the sake of securing their borders and regulating who is allowed to come in and out, this is an exercise not just in sound theological right, this is an exercise in natural law. So to argue for a complete open borders policy would not necessarily be the Catholic position. In fact, it's justly sound to argue for strong borders.
Right. I would think in one way you could relate it to the church. Maybe this is an exaggeration, but it would be like somebody coming into a Catholic church and saying, I want to go to communion because I'm here. And you say, well, no, you really can't. You're not Catholic. Well, that's not fair. And you should be welcoming me as a stranger. So everybody says, sure, of course, you're welcome inside the church and you're welcome to the warmth and the hospitality. But no, you can't receive that because you're not Catholic, just like somebody coming into a country should be limited because they're not a citizen of that particular country. So I think we all understand the limitations. When you pull proof texts out of Scripture and just use them independently, it's amazing how many things you can bash people over the head with. Of course, we have to be kind to strangers. I mean, that as Father Mitch would tell you, that was rudimentary in the understanding of the people of the Middle East. They always welcome strangers. We read throughout Scripture, giving people their last piece of bread, helping them out, and making something provision for them when they have very little to give them.
Right.
But the whole idea was helping out a stranger who was passing by. It wasn't necessarily a stranger who was planning on coming to live with you on your farm or in your house. And we have to be open to people who are suffering, obviously. And there's also a difference, I think. I mean, what the church's position should be versus what a government's position should be are two different things. I'm not expecting the church to protect me from the enemies of the world. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for the church to protect me from the enemies of the netherworld. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
I mean, the government's job is to secure me in this temporal existence.
Yep, exactly. And I think that provides for us the sound context necessary, that there can be no talk of the common good at a national level if we don't talk about anywhere from strong borders to also, and this might be an unpopular sentiment, but it actually is grounded in natural law and therefore sound reading of the scriptures. The prioritization of the needs of the nation that the administrator is supposed to govern. So elected representatives of this nation are meant to look out for primarily the common good in this nation, and then to start thinking of other nations and their like, right? So when we consider all of that, this is completely in line with church teaching, and so we have a lot to be hopeful for the next 4 years, but there are also some things that we ought to be cautious about.
Right, absolutely. Listen, the answer for all of us, as you indicated earlier at the top of the show, is, this isn't the church running the country, nor are we looking for the church to run the country.
Yep.
This is a secular government, probably I'd say with realistically more Christian overtones to it than I think the last administration, regardless of the fact that the president had been an avowed Catholic. But I think in the context, I think most Christians would see more of an affinity for the kinds of ideas, at least Christians, who would be considered more orthodox and fundamental in their belief system and less progressive, things like gender. Right. Indicating there's only two genders. A lot of people get confused sometimes, and they say, well, why do you talk about that on Father Spitzer's Universe? And it's because the thing itself is indicative of a greater problem.
Yep.
It's a confusion in people. It's confusion in the natural law. It's a confusion in understanding how God created the universe.
Yep.
And if you're getting that underpinning wrong, you end up with these kinds of affectations of the trans movement and things like that, or people deciding that I basically can create my own universe just by the way I happen to think about it.
Right, and it goes back to Justice Kennedy's statement, right, that at the core of liberty,
it's right, exactly.
And as infuriating as it is, one only needs to step back and realize that that's a ludicrous position to hold. So we're moving forward with a presidency that at the lowest level seems to want to disavow wokeism and wokery, and therefore espouse a slightly more objective view of reality.
Well, I would think that what's being espoused is kind of like a Chestertonian view of the world, which is common sense. I mean, he was known as the apostle of common sense. And I think that's what a lot of the people are voting now and honestly saying is that, this makes sense to me. Yeah. And I think it made sense to people many times before, but they were being so cascaded with name-calling and being made to feel that they were a bigot or a racist or a Luddite or some other negative connotation that made you weren't being open and loving to everybody and his brother. And so people felt were made to feel guilty, or they were cowed by that, and cowed by that. And so we have to realize now that more and more people have started to say, no, I think we actually, the majority of people actually kind of see things the way they should be. Yeah. And we love people. We want to help people. We want to do things. But, you have to help people. And you also have a reasonable expectation that people will help themselves. Right. It's not the idea. I mean, St. Paul, nobody ever quotes the old, if you don't work, you don't eat. That's like that doesn't exist in Scripture anymore. And the idea of saying, well, we're helping the poor. Who are we talking about first? First, it's the widows and the orphans. Why? They can't take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. So people who need help should be given help, without a doubt, at the number one priority. But not everybody who decides, oh, gee, I'd rather ask for help than do much about it.
Right.
They don't necessarily shouldn't be at the front of the list.
Right. Doug, thank you so much for making the time to speak with us. My guest, Doug Keck, President and COO of EWTN, and we are talking about objectively appealing to those principles of the common good in this next 4 years of presidency. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com. When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
My daughter told me she was published in a scientific journal as an undergrad. I'm so proud of her. The world needs Catholic physicists, and my daughter's going to be one of them.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I told him about the woman who came to me and said her two children hadn't spoken to each other for 2 years. Their grandma died, and she was very wealthy. She left half to each one. She said they're arguing over a commode. She said it's inlaid. Can you imagine being in hell and somebody saying to you, what are you here for?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. On last Friday, former President Joe Biden proclaimed that the Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land. In 2020, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the amendment. So theoretically, we've reached the 3/4 majority needed to amend the U.S. Constitution, but experts have said that the amendment failed to pass the congressional deadline in 1982. It's also unclear what legal weight the declaration carries. Either way, it's expected to set off a kind of legal fight for the incoming Trump administration, or at least the inaugurated Trump administration. John Czarnetzky joins us. He is the Chief Executive Officer and Dean at the Ave Maria School of Law. He also serves as legal advisor to the Holy See's mission to the United Nations. John, thank you so much for making the time to speak with us. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, and it's always my pleasure, Marcus. Happy New Year to you and your audience.
Happy New Year to you. It's always a tremendous joy when we get to reconnect with Ave Maria University and Ave Maria School of Law. And
thank you.
John, okay, so paint the picture for us, because the truth is it's a concerning statement, to say the least, that the Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land.
Yes. I think that the picture begins just with a small civics lesson or reminder. How do amendments become part of the Constitution? That's Article 5 of the Constitution, and you recounted it pretty well. There's a couple ways in which amendments can be proposed, but in this case, as in most often, 2/3 of both houses of Congress must pass the amendment. So the federal Congress can originate it. And then once that's done, the proposed amendment then goes to state legislatures. Again, there's another option, but it's rarely used. And the amendment becomes part of the Constitution if 3/4 of the legislatures of the states, so that would be 38 nowadays, ratify the amendment. So that's the thumbnail sketch. Now,
right.
There's, as you implied, there's quite a bit of nuance to this, though. That's what we lawyers get paid to do. Let's start with the fact that if those of your folks that were listening carefully notice the president has absolutely zero role in this process. Indeed, one of the early Supreme Court cases interpreting the Constitution was a 1798 case, apparently, that said precisely that. So any declaration by a president about the viability or whether an amendment has been ratified, et cetera, really is nothing more than an opinion. And so the president, simply by saying that this amendment has become part of the Constitution, that doesn't make it so.
Right.
Just one little wrinkle there. I suppose, this isn't quite my area, but I suppose a president could order the proper authority in the government, in this case it's actually the Archivist of the United States, to add an amendment to the Constitution, because the Archivist reports to the president. But President Biden very carefully did not do so. So to me, there really doesn't seem to be an argument that the president's declaration makes it so.
Right.
Now, whether or not the ERA is part of the Constitution doesn't depend on the president declaring so. I think his declaration is best understood as drawing attention to what he believes is a ratified amendment. And I'm trying to boil this down to the basics. There's another thing that Article 5 doesn't discuss, and it really is the crux of the matter here, is whether in an amendment, in conveying an amendment from Congress to the states, can Congress incorporate a provision that says states only have so long to ratify? Congress did so here. Congress has done so in a number of amendments, in a number of cases. The Supreme Court held early last century that if there is no such time limit, the amendment stays open for ratification. The last amendment that was added to the Constitution in early 1990s had been open for 200 years, Marcus.
Yeah.
But there was no limiting time. Here, Congress was very careful to say 7-year time limit. And when that time limit expired, it was extended for 3 years. There's controversy involving that I won't get into unless you want to. But even after the 10 years time limit, only 35 states had ratified.
Right.
So we have kind of a neat legal question. Supreme Court has held that if no time limit is specified, then the amendment remains open for ratification by the states. But does that necessarily mean, I don't know logically, I'm not a logician, I don't know whether it's the opposite or the inverse, but does that mean that if there is a time limit, the time limit is valid? When the time limit doesn't appear in the language of the amendment itself. I'm sorry to sound so pedantic and lawyerly, but it really is.
No, that's exactly the nuance of the argument.
And this seems to have been, this is exactly what you just said, the nuance of the argument. The majority of folks, and when I say folks, I mean scholarly opinion, but this is not without controversy, seem to agree that Congress can specify time limits. In fact, the Archivist of the United States, who's kind of in a hot seat here, actually in response to President Biden's announcement, issued a statement that basically said longstanding custom and practice leads me to conclude that the Equal Rights Amendment has not been ratified by the requisite number of states,
right?
Because there's a time limit.
So, if I may just expand that a little bit, of the 38 states that President Biden has said has ratified, or he believes has ratified the ERA, 5 of them have subsequently rejected it. 3 just based on everything you've been sharing, ratified it, within 40 years after everybody else. So you've got this real question and concern of its expiration. The issue, therefore, as I mentioned in the open, it's going to be contentious during the next 4 years, is it expired or not? And if it is, then why are we continuing to push this?
Yes. Well, I think the proponents agree that pushing it, the reason for pushing it is policy results, or what they would view as the natural outcome of having the amendment.
Right.
So, as my understanding, I did a little research on the recent history, and Senator Gillibrand, as I read it, I think it might have been in the New York Times story on this. Senator Gillibrand had some type of reception line, put a bug in President Biden's ear on this, and she had been quoted, I believe, to say, well, among other things, this would be a useful tool to prevent the prosecution of, say, parents taking a young daughter across state lines to get an abortion. And proponents often cite abortion rights as so-called abortion rights as a reason for passing the ERA. That's very interesting as well. We could probably talk for an afternoon about, well, what would the theory of that case be? But presumably it would be, you can't, even with an ERA, cross state lines to murder somebody.
Yep.
So the case would have to be, it's a healthcare thing.
Yeah. The argument is that pushing this might provide the constitutional backing that Roe lacked. John, thank you so much for making time to speak with us.
Anytime, Mark.
My guest, John Czarnetzky, Chief Executive Officer and Dean at the Ave Maria School of Law. Obviously, the ERA is contentious. We have to keep praying for our nation. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
We are the pro-life generation, passionate about building the culture of life in our healthcare and in our nation. But not all healthcare options are equally pro-life, and some provide morally objectionable procedures. CMF Curo is different. CMF Curo is a pro-life Catholic healthcare ministry providing a pathway for its members to build the culture of life in their healthcare choices, not destroy it. Learn more about CMF Curo at mycatholichealthcare.com. That's mycatholichealthcare.com. Italy aficionado Teresa Tamio's newest book is coming soon to the Ave Maria online store. In Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Teresa Tamio provides how best to navigate the most popular sites, best routes, and how to best soak in all the beauty Italy has to offer. She also shares the most inspiring journeys to make your Italy excursion utterly unforgettable. Shrines and Wonders from Catholic Connections, Teresa Tamio will be found soon at AveMariaRadio.net. This program brought to you in part by the town of Ave Maria, Florida.
Ave Maria, a big kind of small town. A golf cart-friendly, ride-your-bike-everywhere kind of town with something for everyone. Resort-style amenities, 2 golf courses, shopping, and dining in our town center. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at the core of the community and a wide range of homes to meet your family's needs. Visitors are welcome. More information can be found at AveMaria.com. Ave Maria, a big kind of small town.
Christ is the answer, with Father John Riccardo.
He always starts with the good things. You know, the 7 letters to the churches and the book of Revelation is a great way to write letters to other people, by the way, or to have conversations with other people. You start with what's going well. You do this, this, and this really well. I love it. Thank you. Here's what you're lacking. And I think for many of us as men, what the Lord's communicating at that second part of the letter or the second part of the conversation is, here's what we're lacking. You don't ever spend enough time with me. You have no idea what I'm trying to offer you. in the gift of my friendship. Or if you do, you don't make time for it. And if you would but come to me, I would change your life like that. But you don't come. Not with the regularity that I want you to come. Not with the ardor and the fervor and the passion that I want you to come. I have a hunch, I have more than a hunch, that's what he says to me, and I got a hunch that's what he would say to many of us.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popcak.
Good discipline is an important part of raising healthy, happy, godly kids, but it can be hard to know what good discipline really looks like. St. John Bosco developed an approach to child rearing we call discipleship discipline. Discipleship discipline helps kids understand the good intentions behind their bad behaviors and gives them opportunities to learn and practice meeting those intentions in more virtuous, effective ways. Discipleship discipline helps kids come to see their parents as loving mentors who can help them meet all their needs in healthy, godly ways. That's one reason that discipleship discipline is such an important part of the liturgy of domestic church life. To discover more ways your family can celebrate the liturgy of domestic church life, check out the newest editions of Parenting with Grace and visit CatholicCounselors.com. I'm Dr. Greg Popcak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. President Donald Trump has officially been sworn in, 47th President of the United States of America, completing one of the greatest political comebacks in American history. In his usual style, at his swearing-in ceremony, he declared that the golden age of America begins right now. What can you and I as Catholics actually expect from the next 4 years? We're joined by my friend Peter Laffin. Peter is staff writer at the National Catholic Register, contributor at the Washington Examiner, and his work has appeared in the Catholic Herald, the Catholic Thing, and Real Clear Politics. Peter, thank you very much for making the time to speak with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Marcus. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, the joy is completely mine, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. So, let's open with that reality, the greatest political comeback in at least recent American political history.
Yeah, there's nothing that comes to mind that even slightly compares to this kind of comeback. It's the stuff of movies, and I think that if somebody attempted to give the script to a Hollywood producer, it would get rejected for just not being plausible. If you today, seeing that speech, seeing Trump's speech at the Capitol Rotunda, it was impossible to not go back into time at all of the different moments in Trump's political life in which he has been counted out, totally written off. And that goes back to the very beginning stages when he first came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower and announced his candidacy 9 years ago. His candidacy, his political life was basically laughed away. People mocked it. They mocked his insistence on fixing the immigration crisis and building a border wall. And today he gives a speech where he delivers this line about immigration. He said it very succinctly, very matter-of-factly, I'm going to declare a national emergency on the issue of immigration. And everybody in attendance erupts in applause. And my mind went back to 9 years ago when he was laughed off the public stage for even bringing this issue up. He was a real visionary. You think of 4 years ago when he left the Capitol in pretty much disgrace, disowned by many in his own party. You think of 2 years ago when he announced his candidacy for the Republican nomination again. Really wasn't well received. People thought he didn't look great. People thought he didn't have good people around him. Everybody thought, maybe Ron DeSantis is a better candidate. And then he's, shot in the head at the Butler Fairgrounds. All of these incredible moments where it seemed like he was on his way out of the political scene, only for him to come back today. Really riveting stuff. Just incredible. An all-American story. One for the ages.
It truly is, and even as you're talking, I'm going through the memory of his political career in my mind and realizing, even if one doesn't want to admit that this is the greatest political comeback in American political history. One has to, at the very least, acknowledge the sheer resilience of the man, especially considering nearly 4 years ago, all predictions were to the effect that his political career was over.
Yeah, you can say a lot of things about Donald Trump. You can say that he lacks certain virtues in certain areas. And I'd be one of the first to say that. He's demonstrated that on numerous occasions throughout his political life. But one thing you can't say about Donald Trump is that he doesn't possess fortitude. He is the unstoppable force moving forward. And everybody who's tried to get in his way, he's sort of batted aside. And it's an incredible thing to watch the speech today and see the people seated behind him.
Right.
And that was kind of cruel the way that was done, with Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris directly over his shoulder. Barack Obama, who was really his first political rival, over his shoulder, watching him give this speech in which he pulled no punches, talking about the decay of the establishment,
right,
the failure of these Democratic politicians. And then on the other side, all of the Republican opponents he's had. This is another facet of this victory that we don't mention enough. Donald Trump single-handedly leveled the Republican Party. It was something else entirely when he came on the scene. You think of the party of Mitt Romney and George W. Bush and John McCain, and Trump came in and brought a bulldozer to it, and now he is the Republican Party. And so he had all the opponents on that side, on his own side of the aisle. And he'd knocked them all over, one by one over the course of 9 years. And there he was standing today in his characteristic Trumpian bravado, cataloging his many victories. And you could feel the pain on the faces of those people. It's truly remarkable.
I think it goes without saying that, and it's unfortunate that this is being touted in this way, but it goes without saying that the global church's concern of the Trump administration is going to be his tightening of the border situation, which he has rightly termed a crisis. Now, I want to just make sure that it's clearly stated here. I'm an immigrant, and I firmly believe in the church's teaching for strong borders, for nations, because that is how you come to a level of preservation of the common good. And for some reason now that seems to be an unpopular statement. So just kind of comment on that, Peter, in terms of where he's standing and the kind of voices we've heard, even from the Holy Father, about this.
Yeah, from the Holy Father and also from the USCCB, our bishops have some very clear teachings available on how to go about our immigration crisis that are available to all Catholics. I've written on the subject numerous times in the past few months, and there are going to be loyalties that are going to be tested in this presidency. Make no mistake. There will be times when Catholics who revere Trump and love Trump because he has been their voice of defense against the woke insanity, and against crackdowns on religious liberty and free speech. There will be moments where their loyalties will definitely be tested. And I think you get it exactly right on the issue of immigration. And I think the first place we're going to see this happen is if he tries to revoke birthright citizenship. As a matter of fact, that might be happening right now. I understand that he is at the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C., and he's about to sign a flurry of executive orders, something like 200, which is unprecedented. It's very Trumpian, too. It's shock and awe. We're shocking the system, and we're changing it. If one of those directives, however, is an order that attempts to remove birthright citizenship, meaning somebody who's brought into this country in a mother's womb by an illegal immigrant and is given birth to on U.S. soil, that person doesn't have automatic citizenship at that point. If he tries to reverse that, he's going to be clearly out of step with the teachings of the Catholic Church, and particularly the teachings of our Bishops' Conference. And so we're going to see a real immediate test of that loyalty. It could happen tonight, where Catholics are going to have to say to themselves, conservative Catholics, oh boy, what are we doing? And are going to have to think real hard about how to proceed.
Right. So you've got the border crisis situation, mass deportation, and ultimately the questions of the dignity of the human person. So all of these are going to have to be at the forefront of our discernment. But you've also got the question of where both he and J.D. Vance stand on abortion in terms of the abortion pill, in terms of IVF. Catholics have had their alarm bells on the ready ever since the campaign because of statements they've made.
Yeah, a lot of that happened behind the scenes. It didn't really bleed into the national consciousness as it did among Catholics. That there's some real daylight here. There's some real distance between Catholic teaching and what appears to be the Trump agenda, and that includes statements made by now Vice President J.D. Vance, who we know is a Catholic convert, and who appears to be a very devout Catholic. Exactly how this is going to play out is uncertain. A few areas where this might rear its head is at the HHS, the Health and Human Services, where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is poised to take over as secretary. We know that RFK has been really ambiguous over how, what his position on abortion is. I've attempted to write about this numerous times, and I can hardly figure it out. He has to make a explicit statement. But that's where we'll first see this problem.
We are talking with Peter Laffin, my friend, staff writer for the National Catholic Register, contributor to the Washington Examiner, and we are talking about some of the things we as Catholics ought to look out for and can expect from the next 4 years of a Trump presidency. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
I've seen the difference in my son since he's been at Ave Maria. He's happy, he's excited about what he's going to do with his degree, and he's living his faith.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
Maybe you've been hearing a lot about the need to make a spiritual communion while participating from home in a live-streamed or broadcast Mass. Maybe you've even prayed the prayer of spiritual communion. Spiritual communion is a concept that goes all the way back to the 4th century. It flourished in the Eastern Church and gradually moved west. Spiritual communion stresses the transcendence of God, where we unite our desires, intentions, and loves with the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the consecration of the Eucharist at the altar. Jesus, I embrace you and unite myself wholly to you.
Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
Everything we say in the Mass is directly from Scripture. The opening prayers, the closing words from the deacon. Everything except the homily, which is an actual reflection, or is supposed to be on the readings of the day. Everything is directly from Scripture. So when people say, well, I never heard the Bible at Mass, and that's why I left the Catholic Church, that's simply factually wrong. They either have not been to a Mass or are not willing to admit just how scripturally sound the Mass is. So I think it's very important to study Scripture. So important, and especially as it relates to the celebration of the Eucharist, right, which is a coming together of a celebration of Thanksgiving. That's what the word means. And there's all kinds of great things you can learn about our relationship with the Lord in the Eucharist and in the Mass by studying Scripture.
Catholic Connections, Teresa Tomeo. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Is it impossible to live Jesus Christ's command that the marriage bond be indissoluble? No, says the Catholic Catechism. The Lord has not placed too heavy a burden on the shoulders of a married couple. By coming to restore the order of creation disturbed by sin, Christ himself gives the strength and grace to live marriage in the new dimension of the reign of God. By following Christ, renouncing themselves, and taking up their crosses, spouses will be able to receive the original meaning of marriage and live it with the help of Christ. St. Paul, in a letter to the Ephesians, emphasizes this when he admonishes men to love their wives as Christ loved the church. For this reason, Paul says, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I wanted to quickly remind all of you that tomorrow we will return to taking calls on Ave Maria in the afternoon. This is our regular Tuesday studio spotlight. There's been a lot of social media news, especially with TikTok and Facebook. TikTok having the short-term ban. Unfortunately, it's back online. We'll talk about that. We want to ask you what policies you have for your own children when it comes to social media and smartphones. We'll be discussing this with Greg Popchak at the beginning of the hour tomorrow, and then we'll turn it over to you. We want to hear from you. How do you regulate social media use? What are some of the effects that you've seen? Now, we are continuing the conversation with my friend Peter Laffin about what we can expect from the Trump presidency. Peter, we were talking earlier about, we've talked about Trump's abortion policies and just some of the promises that have been made that we need to look out for. One of the things that we do want to highlight is that it seems at the very least verbally the promises have been made by the Trump presidency to stand against LGBTQ woke narratives at the societal level, at least in terms of their enforcing. So, quote-unquote gender-affirming care, child mutilation by means of surgery, puberty blockers and the like. The Biden presidency was stalwartly for and even vitriolically pushing these. And it seems like the Trump presidency wants to take a step back and assess this properly.
Yeah, and today it looks like he'll sign an executive order. This was reported last night by an exclusive on the Free Press.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to sign an executive order today to remove gender ideology from every facet of government.
Mm-hmm.
He's just going to strike it out everywhere he finds it. And it's impossible as a Catholic to not be heartened by that.
Yep.
And I say that, not to be mean-spirited, not to be, not accepting of other people. But during the Biden administration, and really across the West, where there were liberally oriented leaders, there was compelled speech. There were places where words and thoughts had to be put in the mouths of people in order for them to maintain their position at the workforce, to not be socially ostracized. So this is a really big deal. It's not about just judging other people, which is how I think many people take it when we Catholics react to the woke stuff. But it's about our religious liberty. It's about our freedom of conscience.
Yep.
It's about nobody being able to put a thought in my head and make me repeat it. And obviously, as a religious person, as somebody who believes in incontrovertible truths, that's an enormously important thing.
Yep.
We remember that Trump made the trans issue very central to his reelection campaign. The most compelling, the most important, and the most successful political ad probably of the last few election cycles was his advertisement where it showed Kamala Harris saying that she was proud of the fact that she wanted to offer sex change operations to, I think, illegal immigrants in prison. Like it was the most out there wild thing you could possibly say.
Right.
And the tagline at the end of that ad was devastating. One of the best written, most effective that I've ever seen. Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. And so, he put this at the center of his campaign. He looks like he's going to act on it right away. And it's hard as a Catholic to not see that as a very good thing.
Yeah. And so we have moral reasons to be heartened by this, but there are also economic reasons that the general American populace will benefit in terms of taxation dollars, in terms of funding into Medicaid and Medicare, and therefore insurance rates and policies pertaining to these treatments.
Yeah, the idea that taxpayer dollars, the taxpayer dollars of Catholics, of every American, were being used to fund these operations, and that acceptance and normalization of this was pushed not just by our culture, but explicitly by our federal government. Has been difficult to stomach for people of faith, for people who believe in incontrovertible truths. If you think about what's happened at the military, most of all, and we've seen this nonstop parade of leaders in the military promoting gender ideology, some of them themselves trans or what have you. And how that probably didn't really reflect the feelings of the soldiers, of the people on the ground. And so we're seeing, I think, a long overdue course correction there. Pete Hegseth, who last week did what everybody has said is a really good job in his nomination hearing, is very likely now to be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. And he has vowed this is his most important thing, is we are going to cut all this stuff out. And we're going to focus on winning wars, on our lethality. And I'm sure that's music to a lot of people's ears.
Yeah. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to pivot right back to the question of economics in general. You and I spoke about this during the electoral process, that perhaps the single biggest determinant factor for Trump winning this election was, or potentially winning the election, was the economy. It was the greatest concern on the minds of most of the United States voters. So what things do we have on the horizon that we can look forward to with the Trump presidency?
So the economic issue is absolutely what got him elected. Catholics and non-Catholics alike all said that the economy is the number one issue. It's the most important thing. And people gave Trump in his first term very high grades on the economy. They thought the economy was very robust, and it was. And we've been mired in inflation, in the cost of living, the housing crisis. How is Trump going to go about solving this? The economists I've spoken to, especially the ones from our most prestigious Catholic universities, are very skeptical of Trump's plan to actually bring down the cost of living. Trump's going to use tariffs. He's going to basically tax what comes in. And what the economists fear is that the tariff plan is going to only worsen inflation because the foreign companies who send in these products, it's going to cost more to produce them. Here's an example that an economist told me about this summer. There was the air conditioning company. I think it was called Carrier, where they had pursued, or Trump during his first term had pursued very protectionist policies. They were protecting this local industry. They were slapping tariffs on air conditioners that came in from foreign countries to make them more expensive. And yes, that saved a number of manufacturing jobs. I think it saved something like 1,000 manufacturing jobs in America. But it made all of our air conditioners more expensive. And so did we improve our economy? That's the sort of question that we're going to be asking ourselves is, okay, we may have done something good for American manufacturing, but we still can't afford the cost of living. It remains to be seen what exactly can be done to bring prices down. I'm not sure exactly. I think probably the policy that he's going after that got the best marks from the economists I spoke with were his tax cuts. You're going to lower the taxes. You're going to spur the economy. You're going to get money flowing into the economy, and our prices will come down. But it's not going to happen fast. And this is where Trump might, some of his rhetoric during the campaign really might come back and bite him, because for everything Trump said on the campaign, it was, we're going to fix it on day one. Okay, he actually did with the Gaza situation. There's a ton of credit for that. He wasn't even in, and he fixed that problem. But the prices, that's not going to happen on day one. And there's a lot of video of Trump saying, I'm going to bring down the cost of living on day one. And it's very easy to see already Democrats cutting commercials with him saying that for the midterm elections in 2 years.
And that's the thing, right? The economy functions slightly more organically than a simple policy passing or an executive order passing.
Right.
One of the ways in which hopefully we're going to see some downward economic pressure when it comes to cost of living might well be the potential savings that might be found by DOGE, by the Department of Government Efficiency, in government spending.
Yeah, that's I'm really glad you pointed that out. I forgot to mention that. That's really important. There's going to be some significant cost cutting. Mm-hmm. Will it be the $2 trillion, which is what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's not part of it anymore? That's another interesting story. But they promised to find $2 trillion per year in savings. That's an astronomical number.
Yeah.
I think people will be very happy, however, to find whatever savings we can. It's obvious that we spend so much money on our government, on our infrastructure, and we seem in this country to get so little in return. Think of our healthcare costs. We spend more than any other country, but we don't get the great results. And we're all aware of this.
Yep.
I think Democrats, even in their core, they're aware of the fact that our government doesn't function as well as it probably could.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, we're taxed to death. Think of California, where they pay 13% income tax. They couldn't even put a fire out. Yeah. They couldn't even get close to putting a fire out, despite all the money, all the functionaries, all of the mid-level government agents who are there, hopefully trying to figure out how to get a working hydrant system. We're nowhere even close to being able to solve this problem.
Right.
And Trump pointed that out in his speech today. I thought it was very effective. I thought it was a little mean because, there's Biden sitting right over his head, and Trump says, "We got a government today that can't even solve the simplest problems." But he's right. It was a simple problem. Yeah. You know that the fires are coming. It's California. It's the Sandana winds. They happen every year.
Yeah.
I think DOGE has a lot of promise.
Yeah, DOGE has a lot of promise. We're running out of time in the segment. Peter, genuinely thank you for your time. Just to put on the minds of everyone listening, his policies on energy, his scrapping of the Green New Deal, approving of new drilling permits offshore on federal lands. We've got some promise in terms of money recirculating in the economy. So hopefully in the next 4 years, we're going to see true downward economic pressure. We're also hopefully going to see greater global peace. Peter, thank you so much for making time to speak with us.
Marcus, thank you so much for having me on. I'm a huge fan of your show. It's always a thrill to come on and talk.
Well, I'm a huge fan of you and your work, so we're going to have you on more often. God bless you, brother.
Great. God bless you.
My guest, Peter Laffin, staff writer for the National Catholic Register, contributor of Washington Examiner, and we've been talking about things that we can expect from the newly inaugurated Trump presidency. Let's continue to pray for our newly elected President Trump and our nation. Until next time, I'm Marcus Peter.